So as you can imagine, not only being a few years older than the rest of the students in kind of your first year, which is foundations, you kind of dabble in all the different mediums and processes, and then you're expected to then pick a major. I was just really experienced in learning as much as I could. I didn't necessarily want to become a photography major or a sculpture major, printmaker, movie, film, multimedia. I just wanted to kind of get my hands on everything, and so being that I had a lot of my electives taken care of through my first 2 years in arts and sciences, I really could focus all of my core credits on art classes. So what I did is I just went through the curriculum every semester, and I found the classes that fit my schedule and I really wanted to take, regardless of what level it was or what the prerequisites were. So I often had to write the professor, meet with the professor to see if I could get a seat in the class, if there was an opportunity, if they would allow for it. And so sometimes I got shot down a few times, and other classes I didn't even get a response. But by and large, most I could just enroll in, and or was able to get the waiver. So after 3 or 4 years of kind of immersing myself in all different forms of art making, and just kind of one or two classes really in all mediums, I had well more than I needed to graduate in terms of credits, and I needed to graduate. But the challenge was that I didn't have any concentrated in a major. So at the time, VPA, you needed to have a core of your credits, at a certain minimum in a certain degree, again, in photography or jewelry making or textile surface pattern or what have you, dot, dot, dot. And I didn't. My credits were all over the place. So we ended up petitioning the school to see if we could give me a unique degree at the time, myself and the assistant dean came up with, which was select studies in the fine arts or general studies in the fine arts. And it went through, and I was able to walk in 1997 and finally get my degree after a few more finishing up credits in the following year. So I was on the long-term schedule with the undergraduate thing. I was part-time for a while. I dropped out of school a few times. I lived in Miami. I spent 2 summers in New York City taking classes part-time. So it wasn't a traditional 4 years and out. But what I got out of it was phenomenal. My extended stay on campus allowed me to build some added relationships with faculty and administration at the time, and sort of my unique course of getting a degree not only allowed me to kind of do it the way I wanted, which wasn't necessarily a bragging right, just sort of kind of where my heart was, but it also impacted the school as well, because I've heard it directly and indirectly that after my case, the school really kind of looked more of a transmedia approach or more of a multidisciplinary approach, which is sort of how the pedagogy is now in the School of Art in VPA. So I'm not going to take credit for it. I guess, was the self-selected guinea pig to kind of get that going. But the relationships I built on campus were so strong as I was graduating that it led me to decide to stay. A lot of my friends were moving to Brooklyn, were moving to San Francisco, Miami, Providence, Rhode Island, even Boston, what have you, sort of the major markets. And a lot of it at the time in the mid 90s was predicated on you moving to a market that fit your medium. So if you were a filmmaker, you're most likely going to LA or California. If you were a fashion designer, you're trying to go to, New York City or Milan or something like that. If you, were a writer, you were off to Brooklyn. So visual artists, there was a couple other areas, painters and, more of the up and coming or sort of emerging artist scenes were happening. So Syracuse wasn't one of them. There was a conversation of it. There's vestiges of kind of what was going on in maybe different eras here in Syracuse. Definitely major institutions alive and well. in terms of the mainstream arts, your symphony, your museums, those sort of civic infrastructure, cultural facilities, and then of course the academic resources that were here with the university and the different colleges. But in terms of a street level kind of funky hip underground meets up and coming emerging young professional art scene, in the mid 90s it was sparse. I mean, there's definitely bands and pubs, definitely people going out for nightlife, occasional, gallery here or there, but it wasn't concentrated. It wasn't really seen or discussed as like sort of a economic development opportunity. It was just sort of like it's here, like any city, you have culture. So we'll talk a little bit about how that tide has changed in the past 15, 20 years here in Syracuse and other places, because the arts not only have persevered, and I think a lot of people opening up to the concept that it's a more than just sort of an expression. It's a lifestyle. It's therapy. It's medicine. It's conversation. It's connectivity. It's community. So the arts are pervasive. Everybody, I believe, is an artist, and how we behave and act in this world is our own creative way of expressing ourselves. How we formally integrate the arts into our education, economic development, neighborhood development, community development, and sort of address some of the ailments that we have right now, and just sort of imbalance and disease that we may have here in our society, that the arts are a great way to address it.